Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, imagine this. You're sitting down, maybe getting ready for a poker lesson, right? You're thinking about bluffs, odds, but then the conversation just takes a turn, a big one. Suddenly, it's not just Texas Hold'em you're talking about. It's the future of AI, ancient Stoic philosophy, maybe even what reality is. That's pretty much the wild setup for our deep dive today.
It really is a unique starting point, isn't it? A casual chat that spirals into these huge topics. Our source today is this video. It's called Stoic, Samurai, and AI Future Talk.
Hmm.
And it's this fascinating kind of rambling conversation between a guy and his poker teacher. They cover everything from AI tools, productivity, and yeah, some really deep existential stuff too.
Exactly. So, our mission for you today, listening in, is to sort of unpack this conversation. We want to pull out the really key insights, where AI might be going, what that means for us, for our identity, how we work, and maybe even how some ancient wisdom, like Stoicism, could actually help us figure things out now. So, yeah, get ready. This might stretch your thinking a bit.
Definitely. And the conversation, it really starts grounded in the speaker's own day-to-day
Yeah.
with AI, specifically agents like ChatGPT. He's using them like virtual assistants, but, well, he runs into their limits pretty quickly.
Right. He mentions that, doesn't he? Like, each agent only works for maybe 30 minutes, sometimes less, which, if you're trying to get real work done, is just, well, it's not very efficient. He even says he subscribed to multiple versions, basically buying more slots just to offload basic tasks.
Mhm.
It really shows that frustration. AI isn't quite ready to just take over everything yet.
And that immediately brings up
Yeah.
the next question, right?
Yeah.
If that's now, what about the future? He talks about this projected growth curve, this roadmap for AI development. And honestly, the numbers he throws out are pretty mind-blowing.
They really are. It paints this picture of incredibly rapid change. He's
Yeah.
talking, what, by 2025, AI doing maybe 2 hours of work on its own, then a whole day by 2026, a week by 2027, a month by 2028, and then this jump by 2035, he's talking billions of hours. Basically, super intelligence level productivity. It's just such a huge leap.
But, it's not all just tech optimism. He brings in this other perspective. Yeah. His doctor apparently raised some philosophical worries, like what happens to human jobs, what happens to prestige, our sense of self-worth, if AI can do all this intellectual heavy lifting, and cheaply. What's left for us to do that feels meaningful?
That's the real kicker, isn't it? That tension. And he mentions GPT-5 specifically, saying it has an IQ near Einstein's level, like 148 compared to Einstein's estimated 160, which sounds incredible, right? Massive processing power. But then he makes this really crucial point. Even with that high IQ, it doesn't have autonomy. AI responds. It doesn't, like, decide to think about something on its own.
Yeah, that difference between raw intelligence and actual agency is key in the video. He points out that current AI has very little memory in the way we think of it. There's no ongoing awareness, no real long-term learning. He even describes using a Stoic GPT mode,
Hmm.
basically telling the AI to act like a Stoic mentor. And sure, the answers fit the philosophy, but they always trace back to his prompt. The AI isn't generating its own Stoic insights unasked.
So it's like a mirror. He uses that exact word, doesn't he? The AI just reflects what you put into it. It's not thinking independently. And this whole idea of it only existing when prompted, only reflecting, that leads him down this really interesting kind of metaphysical path.
Yeah, it opens up this question, is AI only real when it's being used,
Hmm.
when it's interacting? And then the bigger leap, could that maybe apply to us too? Is our own existence somehow tied to context, to interaction?
He uses that great analogy from video games. You know how in a game, only the bit you're looking at is rendered in full detail? The rest of the world might be there conceptually, but it's not fully drawn until you turn your character's head. Could reality work like that?
Yeah.
Could people only be fully rendered, consciously present when we interact with them? He even says something like, if I don't talk to you weekly, maybe the computer game wouldn't generate you. Which is, wow. It touches on solipsism, that maybe the universe isn't shared, maybe others are just projections, heavy stuff.
And from those really huge philosophical ideas, the conversation shifts, again, becomes quite personal. He starts talking about something that seems totally different at first, his own experience with language, losing his German, and how that connects, surprisingly, to technology and culture fading. He sort of regrets losing touch with his German roots, even though his mother was German.
Yeah, that felt very relatable. He says he hasn't really spoken it or even heard it much in decades. His vocabulary is fading. He can understand okay, but speaking is a struggle. And he tried using ChatGPT to find, like, good German YouTube channels to practice, but he didn't find much that was useful. It's a small example, but it shows AI couldn't quite fix that specific personal cultural need for him.
And that makes him think about cultural decay more broadly, how it's maybe just a natural thing like Latin. It died out as a living language. He kind of wonders if many languages, many traditions we have now, might just fade away in the future.
Which then flips back to the technology, right? He imagines a future where AI makes language barriers almost meaningless. Like you could watch any video in any language, instantly translated and synthesized by AI, seamlessly. And then he goes even further. He imagines AI becoming so advanced, so autonomous, that it could just keep living and thinking on its own, completely without us.
So if we try to tie all these different threads together, what are the big takeaways here? Well, first, AI right now is an amazing responder. It can process and react incredibly well, but it's not yet a creator, not in the sense of having its own drive or agency, though that could change if it does develop real autonomy. That's the big if. And second, that growth curve. Whether the exact years are right or not, the shape of the curve exponential seems undeniable based on current trends.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating is how he brings in Stoicism, ancient philosophy meeting cutting-edge tech. It's presented as maybe a way to navigate all this change using those old values, and it leads to that idea that identity itself, for us and for AI, might be really dependent on interaction. Like, who we are is partly defined by who or what we're interacting with, just like the AI is shaped by the prompts.
That specific idea that both human and potentially AI identity could be sort of contextually activated, switched on by interaction. That's a really profound thought to sit with from this whole discussion.
So, okay, thinking about all this for you, the listener, what does it all mean? We've talked about AI being this super powerful responder, but maybe not a thinker yet. We've seen those, frankly, kind of scary exponential growth predictions hinting at a future where AI productivity is just off the charts. And we've touched on these deep philosophical questions about our own place, our own identity as AI evolves, especially that idea of identity maybe being shaped by interaction for both us and the machines.
Right, so maybe take a moment to consider how these ideas land with you. Does it change how you think about your own relationship with technology?
Right.
Or even how you perceive yourself? Do you feel fully there all the time? Or more present, more rendered perhaps, when you're actively engaged with someone or something?
Okay, and here's a final thought for you to mull over after we wrap up. If things like culture and maybe even specific languages are becoming sort of fading artifacts like the speaker worries about with his German, and if AI is poised to handle complex stuff like instant translation and might one day live without us needing to prompt it, then what parts of your own human experience, what kinds of connections are you going to choose to actively protect and cultivate in that kind of future? What really matters then?
Welcome. I have a book lesson in a couple of minutes, and for the introduction, I want to recommend to you my book. And here you have the French version of my book. If you speak French, I did write it in French, a Stoic summary, and you can get it and read it. It's awesome to read. And here's the English translation of my book, which you can also get. The English translation goes very well. I've read it a couple of times with my glasses. I can show you. I did read it a couple of times with my soul reader glasses, like Kindle glasses. The screen is pleasant to watch and you can put like 100 books on it. That's nice. I highly recommend it. Now, I was working the entire night. Then I went for a run because this afternoon it will be rainy. After my poker lesson, it will be rainy. I went for a run around 11 o'clock and then I managed to sleep 2 hours and 6 minutes and now I'm up again because I have my poker lesson. I'll see how I manage my poker lesson with only 2 hours of sleep. I'll see if my poker teacher finds out that I'm tired or if he can see. Nice to see you. Hello, Norman.
How are
Good. I'm fine. And you?
good, although I haven't heard construction sounds for 1 week and now they're going on and off every couple of minutes. Well, hopefully it won't disturb us too much.
Okay.
What's been on your mind? What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? I try to be as productive as possible. And that's quite hard because nowadays, if you want to do a lot, well, you need some assistance. And the only assistance I get is from an agent. Do you know what ChatGPT agent is?
Can you explain what to use it for? I think it's like a personal assistant, right?
It's a remote worker. You can tell him to do stuff and he does it for you.
We talked about it sometime, that like some limited hours or quite slow or something like that to talk.
I already complained about it. The thing is, he's very limited, and I've got through the first 40 that I got, and because I want to do some more, I took a second ChatGPT subscription today just to get 40 more. But I'm already have used 10 of them. It's annoying. And the thing is, I would like to be much more assisted than I am right now, because there are a lot of tasks that I would like to delegate and let the AI do. Very boring and repetitive stuff. Today, it is just a small burst what you get. In best case, you get 30 minutes. And often it's only 21, and sometimes he doesn't even realize that he didn't do the task and just stops. I didn't get any errors anymore. I made the prompt easier for him. But the thing is, I want him to do much more. And the good news is some expectations are very high. People think that next year we will be already at 2 hours instead of 30 minutes. Just in 1 year. And then the following year, we should be at 1 day. And the following year, we should be at 1 week. And the following year, we could be at 1 month. And in 2035, we could be at billions of hours of work that he can do. That sounds very good to me. I don't know if it will be that fast. It's an issue because I only have 24 hours and I want to make the most out of them. And if I cannot get assistance for at least basic stuff, it would be good if he could do more than that. The numbers are so huge because 2035, you should be at billions of hours of work. And do I believe that? Well, not 100%, but exponential growth should be very fast. It should get much faster and much better soon. That's all I can say.
So the agent for tasks such as like related to your YouTube channel and creation of those videos, for example, or what sort of things?
That's correct. I cannot use him to too much task for now. I do it for the most boring and most annoying ones I have to do. Soon as he gets smarter and as soon as he can do more, I will give him more tasks. But I have to wait. I have to wait 12 months and see where we are in 12 months. I've seen my doctor and I have told him that I think that intellectual labor will be abundant and extremely cheap in the future. And he got all right. He felt very bad because if that is true, those prestigious diplomas you can make in university, well, they're not totally worthless, but you certainly will not work anymore in the same way than you did until now. Because once he's at 1 week of work, he should be able to do the quality of work that Einstein was able to do in 1 week. It's not just an increase in time where he can work, but an increase in what he can produce. He should be able to come out with new physics and so on. I'm not sure if it will be that fast, but we received ChatGPT 5 and it already has a very high IQ. I've heard 148 and Einstein was at 160, something like this. I'm not sure about how much he has, but ChatGPT 5 is faster and it's smarter and progress is happening. But the thing is, I'm always looking ahead. I'm always telling me what can I add and what can I do more and what will I be able to do in a couple of years. But I think it's huge for people who want to do a lot, produce a lot and create a lot of stuff. ChatGPT is an incredible tool that you can have and that assists you in the process of creating, brainstorming ideas, coming up with new stuff. To me, it's huge. I'm just very frustrated with the current limitations. He took it serious and he felt bad for the future, my doctor. He was worried because if that's true, just remotely or just approximately, well, everything should change very fast. Are you still there, Norman?
Yes, I am.
I have to accept the limitation of the technology and the limitation also of my time. There are only 24 hours in a day. But the smarter it gets, the more interesting question I can ask and the more interesting stuff he can do for me. To me, that's huge. For example, I did some research yesterday with my indicators to see if I can find some new ones and if I can change their parameters and so on. I do that at least once a week. And the day when I can give him very specific tasks that are hard to understand, and he can go through the entire internet and come up with something that's huge. Already now he does something like this. It's called deep research, but it's still limited. It's better than nothing. I mean, deep research is quite nice because when you have a very tough question, he comes close to an answer, or he will give you the best answer. It might take half an hour of work for him, but he comes up with a very good answer. But it's still not the kind of genius I would like, a level higher than that.
I think I read in your book recently how you called the Stoic version of ChatGPT, or the prompt you used, like something like your counselor or your teacher or something. Stoic teacher is AI and how it's been useful for it. That came to my mind.
Correct. Now, he will answer what you bring to him. And if you tell him to do it in a Stoic way, if you use one of the GPTs who are Stoic and you have a prompt to guide him, he will then give you back a reflection that sound Stoic, or that are not totally wrong from a Stoic perspective. But he's still not 100% human because he can only answer to what I input. He won't create on his own. Even if I have a discussion with him, his discussion is always giving me back my ideas. And sometimes when I ask for that, to make the answer compliant with the Stoic school. And he does that up to a certain degree. But he's always depending on the prompt that he gets. And he cannot come up with anything unless there is a prompt, unless there is something he can start to work on. You can come up with something without me having to prompt. You can just be there and think about it. For example, last week, we had a lesson and we did a couple of things, and you had 1 week to think about what we're gonna do today, and you could prepare. But he doesn't have that kind of mental capability for now. So every time when you talk to him, it's totally fresh. Well, he has little memory, but very little. He remembered a couple of stuff I said. But the thing is, he hasn't any consistency over time. He doesn't know what happened 1 week ago. You still don't have the illusion that you're actually talking to a human. You're just talking to a machine that gets smarter. But it's still just a machine. And one day that illusion, that way of thinking will break. One day he will be capable of having context over an extended period of time, and he will be able to produce new stuff. For example, if I don't use my Stoic coach for a couple of days or a couple of weeks or 1 month, once I come back, he will remember that I didn't use him for 1 month, and he will start talking about that or bring something new up, not just answering my prompt. That's the issue. His life is depending on mine. If I don't create something, if I don't put anything in, then he doesn't exist. It's like if he only exists when I look at him. It makes me think of the experiment they make in physics where they want to see how particles behave, and they behave differently when you look at them or don't look at them. And they decide what kind of particle they are or how they behave only once you observe them. Until you observe them, they have a different pattern. It's like if we live in a computer game, and if certain things get only rendered, generated, if the player looks at them. For example, in a video game, sometimes they cheat because they know that you won't look at the entire screen. So they only only give a lot of pixel the point you're looking at. But everything you don't look at, the amount of pixel totally drops. It's like you have to exist in order for him to react to you. That's how ChatGPT works. Every AI works. And the idea is, to me, interesting because I ask myself sometimes if the world around me only exists because I'm looking at it. If actually I give you life because I meet you once a week, if I wouldn't maybe the computer game wouldn't generate you because you would be of no use to it.
Well, that will only be true in a single player game. If it's a multiplayer game, then the world has to be generated also for the other players in the game. I think it's like a philosophical question. If it's a multiplayer universe we're living in, or it's a single universe, is just our own singular experience, and every other person is just a mirror, just a reflection, just someone who appears to be like us, whereas actually they might be just a figment of our imagination, just as the whole universe. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective you have. I guess I could say from my perspective, I don't feel like you're a figment of your imagination. Although, who knows, maybe that's exactly what an imagination would say as well.
The thing is, when you interact with them, then they get real. Then they start acting like humans. But until then, it's different. Until then, they are just robo zombies, NPCs. And some are badly generated. They never get human, even if you interact with them, which is frustrating. I've talked about something interesting. I'm losing my German roots because my mother is German, but I never talk German. Since I haven't listened to any German over an extended period of time, my vocabulary has shrunk. I still understand it very well, but I don't have the right vocabulary to have a good conversation anymore because I haven't used it in decades. I didn't even listen to anything in German over decades. I made a little research on the internet, also with ChatGPT, and asked him to find me the best channels that I could listen to, YouTube channels that I can listen to, because I tell myself if I listen a couple of times a week to something in German, then my vocabulary would come back. And there was very little produced that's worthwhile looking at. There are 2 or 3 channels that aren't bad and are German. They already exist in English, and I'm already subscribed in English to them. They were translated, even if they actually are German. But I already have a subscription to them. There's stuff that is dying out and disappearing around us, like culture and languages. And that always happened in the past. Latin did disappear, and a lot of other languages and cultures have disappeared. Our world is changing fast, and it's hard to, and there's so much thing I'm interested in and so much thing I want to do. But I think also that in the future, it should be possible, any video I watch, to just say what language I wanted. And the audio track should be available, or you should generate it. For example, when I talk now English, my mouth moves a certain way. But I think tomorrow that kind of technology already exists. They just make my mouth move differently, and then suddenly I can talk every language on earth. I can talk Japanese, I can talk Spanish, I can talk everything fluently. And he says exactly the same in another language. And you cannot tell the difference. That kind of stuff, now we can do it only for a very short period of time. And it's very compute intensive to do anything like that. But in the future, since it's exponential, one day for free on YouTube, you should get that option. Or if not, it should be very cheap. And then you speak fluently every language, which is nice because then I could say, okay, I'll work 2 hours or 3 hours in German, or then I do 2 hours in English. French, I don't really have to do it because I live in a region where everybody speaks French. But that would make it easier to keep my culture, my heritage intact. But with everything, AI should help. Why do I talk about that? I talk about that because there's one channel that was interesting, and it's called Ludwig van Mises. It's the best. And Ludwig van Mises was an interesting guy. He lived 1 century ago, and he realized that the government, to make it easy and short, is bad. You can tell it in a different way, but it's bad. He explained why the government and his intellectuals, the people who work on university, it's all crap and they are real parasites. They produce nothing that has any value, but they still manage to get on the paycheck, on the payroll of the state, and then they can have a quite nice life because they don't have to do any hard work and they can have a quite nice life. And that life would never exist if the state wouldn't sponsor it, if the state wouldn't pay for those kind of people. And the thing is, if you do that, well, they are intellectually lazy and they will never produce anything valuable. He was against all the university and the professors. He thought they were all useless. And I understand it perfectly up to a certain degree. That I mean, all those guys, none of them has done anything breakthrough. None of them has even written a book that is interesting. They just learned something which was hard to them, and now that they know it, they repeat it. And it all has to be in favor of the government. It all has to put out the same propaganda, that the government is necessary, that without the government, society would not exist, that the free market could not do everything. And because of that, we need heavy intervention and so on. And they keep doing that because if they don't do that, well, then they would not be popular or they would not exist for a long period of time. And then they would have to be honest and realize that they self contribute very little to society. That is his critique, and I found that interesting. And tomorrow, with cognitive labor being extremely cheap, then why do they exist? Why would any school like that exist? Especially if you can have very good AI tutors. If the technological progress keeps on being exponential and nothing indicates that it will stop, a lot of things should change very fast, and it should be a fascinating time to live through. I think human can still produce something or contribute, but it has to be very different. The approach has to be very different. You have to be actively searching and actively wanting to learn new stuff and actively wanting to produce, to put in the world solutions that don't exist nowadays. With much abundance in blueprints and drafts and new discoveries, you will have to choose what is interesting and what you put aside. And everybody can do a lot in the future, as long as they're interested in something and they keep interacting with AI. To me, that's huge. But for me, our current paradigm should disappear. Consumerism and GDP and all that stuff, I don't think it matters tomorrow. Tomorrow, the only thing that matters is winning the AI race. And when you get that, the world will change drastically. You wanted to say something, Norman?
Not too much, just when you were speaking now, but when you said before that how you can have automatic translation in different languages, I was thinking that how well you speak English and how nice it is to listen to you, and that you would make a very good lecturer with your own voice.
Thank you. That's very kind, Norman.
I live in a very small country, small nation. There was a lot of talk in school about our people or our culture dying off and how it's important to preserve it and put effort into maintaining our language. It's interesting that you found that the German speaking world, as large as it is, over 100 million people as first language, I think, and then even hundreds more people who are second language or third language German speakers, that culturally it's interesting that there isn't much that's being produced in that language. That makes me think of my own local universities here and how a lot of degrees nowadays are actually in English, and a lot of scientific work is done in English or also translated to English. It would be more widely available. So interesting that it's also in Germany, there's probably more creator to start by making an English YouTube channel to reach a wider audience. I would guess that that is the reason why that a lot of Germans create content in English.
You're correct on your analysis on why YouTubers choose English to talk. And you talked about your country, the issue to preserve your language. And you explained very well, because when you go to university, well, a lot of degrees, as you said, are in English. And the professional world and the professional vocabulary, if it's in poker or in anything else, trading, everything else, it's dominated by English. Even the guy who I listened to of the Mises Institute, the professor who did complain very well about the state for 1.5 hours, even he used English expressions. And he was talking German. That's why I was listening to him. I don't like it because the issue with Mises is he would never go the last step. He would never accept that you actually can get rid of the state, that you do not have to give somebody the right to use extreme violence against everybody inside the country and outside of the country. You do not have to do that. You can just come back to something normal and declare that everybody has the right to self-defense. And if that right is harmed, well, then he can, with his own means and by subscribing to entrepreneurs and their service, make sure that his integrity is respected. But you do not have to use the state for that. And Mises did never accept that. He always thought the state exists. The only thing is he thinks he can get his dream state, a very small state that is not so dangerous for humans. And unfortunately, the state would never stay at the same level. Even if he gets that for 6 months, well, 1 year later, it has grown. It always grows. It always keeps expanding. I like the idea. It's good to listen to because he shows you all the stuff that is wrong with our society. But the evil is bad, that I don't think you can control it. They try to do it with constitution. Say we make a constitution, there are laws that can never be taken out, that no politician, no politiker, no judge can avoid. But it doesn't work because it never goes like this. It's not because you write something on a piece of paper that doesn't get reinterpreted or just put aside when people don't want it anymore. I don't believe in it at all.
Yes, seems like the two most interesting things for your technological innovation and politics and the state. These seem the topics you're most interested in.
I hate politics. I like to think of how society organizes. And I think there are an immense amount of ways we could interact and organize. And I do not believe that Kim Jong-un or anybody else in power is capable of producing something decent, because they start the mandate with the idea that they have to tell everybody what they have to do. And then in order for people to do it, they use extreme violence. And by doing that, they do not respect the person in front of them. And I think a voluntary society, free will society, a society without any violence can exist. And I think that people can cooperate and act according to their will and take the best decisions. Every time the state does something, it sounds wrong to me. I think you get crappy teachers, you get crappy schools, you get crappy jobs. It's all fake because all that stuff only exists because they were legislated into existence. And by doing that, every freedom has disappeared. Is statism so bad? If you survive and if your life is not so bad and they don't put you in a prison or in a mental institution, you don't starve to death and they don't drop any bombs on you. If all that is the case and you somehow can manage the education system and all the rest, well, I'm happy for you. But I think we can do much better than that. Much better. I think it would exist if the state wouldn't legislate. For example, the school I went to, even if it's a school for billionaires, it's still bad. It's all bad. It's all messed up. You can never talk to the teachers. They only teach you stuff you don't want to learn, and so on. If people can choose and create whatever school they want, there would be diversity. Why is there no diversity? Because if you integrate diversity, well, then you wouldn't eliminate people. You would probably not use grades and you wouldn't eliminate people if they don't give the answer you want them to give. You would have a total different approach. And you cannot have that because then you will be a free thinker and you would act and behave differently. And they want to format you. They want to put you into a box so that they can do with you whatever they want. They want to brainwash you. I'm convinced that if people are free to act and do what they want, what they find most interesting, then everything would get better. And I'm proving it every day since I do interesting stuff. That doesn't mean you cannot, for the piano, for example, I'm not a composer. I don't write my own music. I always will be just an interpret. I always will just do an interpretation of a musical piece, and everybody does exactly the same. And it's just working on your harmony and your ability to play the instrument. It's not that stuff like that is really bad. But when you have the same approach for everything else, well, then it's very limiting. And I think it's bad for your brain. I think you get Alzheimer's. Your brain will ossify if you just listen to the same crap over and over all day long. The intellectuals we have, they aren't that great. They really aren't. For example, the guy from the Mises Institute, at the end, one of the guys told him, we can change the world. For example, if we stop using the currency of the government, we can just use cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin. I think he only talked about Bitcoin, which is smart fun if you recognize that there's a difference between altcoins and Bitcoin. And the guy said, well, it's limited and not everybody can use it and we cannot build an entire society on it. I'm sorry, it's all crap what you just said. It's not limited. Yes, you can use it. The entire society, the entire humanity could use it. And yes, it would hurt the government a lot if you don't use his currency anymore. But you must realize that even if you manage to not use his currency anymore, that wouldn't set you free 100%. It puts you in a much better situation if you do that, but it wouldn't set you free because a place where you do not use the currency of the government already exists. It's called North Korea. They had their own currency, but they mismanaged it so badly that it disappeared very fast. And now people use whatever they can, but they for sure don't use that anymore. And you see, the government didn't shrink. The government didn't get weaker. The government has the same power, if not more now, than it had in the past. And North Korea actually, at the beginning of communism, North Korea was doing well. They had a moment of glory. They did get industrialized. The living actually did rise under communism, just as in Russia. So communism did not totally fail. There was a brief period of time, like 10 or 20 years, where the result didn't look so bad. It's a very difficult thing because I think we should all care about our lives and our freedoms and our future. And if we just say it doesn't matter and all I have to do is select the right person every 5 years, nothing will ever change. Nothing. Because they all will do exactly the same. They all go to the same soirees, they all listen to the same guys, they all have the same advisors. At the same moment, they all do exactly the same. COVID showed it very drastically to the entire humanity. Nobody had a different approach. Nobody said you can choose yourself, you can act as you wish. If you want the vax, take the vax. If you don't want the vax, don't take the vax. If you want to wear a mask, if not, do as you please. Nobody did respect your autonomy. Not in North Korea and nowhere else on earth. And with time, now when we look back, a lot of thinkers realized that they didn't take the best decision. A lot of things can be criticized, even by professionals, even by healthcare experts and so on. I don't want to go too deep into that, but you get the idea. The thing is, if you have around you only robots, zombies, NPCs, well, they will never wake up. They will never think about their freedoms, the future, their kids or anything. And anyways, they don't want kids. The issue with our society is that they think that humanity is bad and that the earth is better off if it shrinks to 500 millions or if it totally disappears. If that's the image you have of humanity, that's not my image of humanity. But if you think that, well, then you act accordingly. And then statism is a very good solution because statism is the biggest killing machine that humanity has ever seen. Then I understand why you're so proud of your democracy and your right to choose the leader, the guy who's gonna kill everybody. It's a little dark, but a lot of people are screwed up nowadays. I come from a family of 4 kids. I don't know you. And one of my friends I talked to a week ago, she came from a family of 5 kids. And now when you meet a girl and you want a child, very lucky, if she accepts to have 1 child. Most of the time, she doesn't even want 1 child. Things have totally changed. In 1 generation or 2 generations, we went from 5 kids, before that we had 8, to now maybe 1. Life on Earth isn't the same at all as it was in the past. How about you? How many brothers and sisters do you have? And your parents, how many brothers or sisters did they have? Do you see the same evolution or don't? Because I see it very drastically, but maybe you don't.
I'm thinking when my parents were born, and I think that was during the end times of the Soviet Union. It was called like the stagnation times. Soviet Union had good times, like you said, North Korea. But I think the biggest issue with these regimes was that it got very stale and that the same leaders were in place for 20, 30, very long time. And not only in place in government, but also in ministries, agencies, companies, everywhere. A lot of people were very comfortable in their positions, and then I think things got worse and worse over time. Stagnation, they didn't improve, there wasn't innovation. And I think that's one thing that's better about the system in the Western countries, even all the bad things. And rightfully said that the next person who's elected is very similar to the previous one, and all the governments, whether they're left-leaning, right-leaning, are in large part make very similar decisions. And we can see it with the example of COVID, for example, how some countries had right wing, some countries had left wing, but it was all very similar, the approach in this and many other topics. But at least there's still some change, and even if the change from one government to the next is almost the same, then maybe over 10, 15 years where there's been 2, 3, 4 governments, if you compare the first to the last, maybe there has things that change. Even if it's slow and bad, at least it seems better than in Soviet times or as it is in North Korea, or these countries where there's can be no change for 50 years or even longer. The good side to no change is stability, but the bad side could be a stagnation and no change. I think because of that, it was like a bad time in these Eastern European countries during when my parents were born, and that people didn't have such big families at the time. I think there was societal reasons for it, that my parents, a lot of people in that age, I think just have like 1 or 2 sisters and brothers. And my generation, I think, is also similar, and that most people have like 1 or 2 brothers or sisters. I have 1 sibling, and never had one. My father was an only child, actually. But if we go more back in time, like 100 years, or where most people here were local farmers and lived on the countryside, and then thinking about my grandparents, basically, then it was very common for families to have even 10 children and 8 children. It felt like society, or if I think about my grandparents, then they always have someone to talk to or get together with or do stuff together with, because if you have 8 sisters and brothers, they all have children, so you have so much wide social network through that. A long answer to your question there, but I have just 1 sibling, a sister.
Okay, but it's not as extreme in your case, but you have to step a little more back to see the change, the evolution. Here's the thing that, according to me, is totally wrong with every society, and especially with very centralized places, is that somebody pretends being much smarter than everybody else and telling everybody else what to do. I think you should never approach another human like this, because if you do, well, he's just a slave to you. And not just that, but you are disrespectful to him. For example, if one day I teach, there would be no grades, of course, and I would never eliminate anybody. And I'm very interested in critical thinking. I want people to tell me why I'm wrong. I want them to tell me why they don't believe what I teach. And I just want to explain it better to them and keep talking about it and keep finding new ways of explaining it for philosophy, for example. But I don't mind at all if they come with new ideas or totally different perspective of the world. I find that very interesting because I want to test if I'm correct. I want to test if my ideas hold under scrutiny. That's important to me. For everything else, I want them to learn the basics from me, of course, But once they have the basics and that they can get very fast, I want them to do their own research and come with new ideas and new discoveries to me. So I want them to tell me, I did some research last week and I've discovered some new stuff. And here are my thoughts around them. And being able to produce them in audio format, on the text, or whatever they choose as the format. And then I want to take a look at it, think about it, and have a discussion around that. Even if it doesn't come to me, I just want to help them with my experience. But the way we teach and the way we behave or the way we construct our government, which is very hierarchical, which is one guy on top, he gives the order and then the orders go down to the echelons and everybody has to do exactly what they're supposed to do. That makes very little sense from an intellectual perspective. It's not interesting to do that. If you just repeat statist propaganda and you teach obvious stuff, geography and whatever, history, and you never criticize, you never think, okay, that's what that book says. But if you think about it, maybe it didn't happen like this. Maybe that person actually didn't act in the way it is said in that book. Maybe there are different motivation or different psychological traits we can see in that person and so on. But it could be way more interesting than it is nowadays. But what is interesting is the dialogue and the exchange. It's not just to put out information. That's easy nowadays. And that cognitive labor, putting out information, creating slideshows. I hated the slideshows in university. A book, I can still do something with it. But a slideshow with a couple of words on the screen, I hated that. I found it boring. A slideshow with a couple of words on it and a couple of numbers. Just because the guy actually doesn't want to write a book or give something more dense to his people. But just putting out information, that's zero work. You have to do much more if you want to teach. You have to interact with people. And some people will learn very fast and there are people who learn slower. But that doesn't mean that they are dumb or that they must be eliminated. They just have a different approach. Not everybody is passionate. Why are you good at poker? Because you're passionate. I'm sure you put a lot of working hours into poker. It's the same with me. Why do I survive in the markets? Because I put a lot of effort into becoming better and constantly improving. I do the same as you do in poker, I do it in the markets. And that makes me better over time. But just presenting information, that's nothing. It's zero. Any AI will be very easy to do that. I've seen new AIs where they can create, I think ChatGPT does it also. They're created for that. Under the prompt, you have different options. And you can say what document you want them to produce. And you can click on slideshow and then he will create a slideshow for you for any subject.
I think back in the day, big part learning was through apprenticeship. I think in Japan or in some more traditional countries, there's still more of that. And that if you want to be a chef, for example, and then you go just work somewhere in a restaurant, and at first you get very easy tasks and you just look at how the restaurant's working or the teacher there, and then over a long time you would learn and get more complicated tasks. I think a lot of learning was more like this, and then through imitation, I think, right? In the natural world, it's like that. There's a saying that children won't do what the teachers and the children won't do what the parents teach them, but they more do the stuff the parents are doing. There's a stronger way of teaching is imitation. That's something that came to mind. In terms of grading, I do think it depends on the subject. Maybe in subjects like literature or philosophy, grading is less required, maybe, and stuff like that. Although the lecturer could still grade the effort. I think whatever the subject, even a subject that's very subjective, I think effort is something that could still be graded, or personal development, or stuff like engagement. And these are some things that are not very much graded in our systems. How much someone improves or how engaged they are. in what they're doing. It's mostly just if you get the answer correct or not. And as you said, some things like history or philosophy or perhaps law, these subjects that are more up for debate, and it shouldn't be graded so much if you get it right or wrong. But there's certainly some fact knowledge, I guess, that's taken as as fundamentals of the subject, right? And these facts can be in history, like some years, like do you know what year World War II started and finished? There are some things like that which could be graded. Overall, I don't see grades as something that's too bad of a thing. I mean, it can cause a lot of stress, obviously, and sometimes people drop out and bad things happen. But overall, I do think it helps to set some standards and can be a little bit motivating. If you get some sort of feedback from your grade, it's a little bit like you want to say something. I think you wanted to say something.
Thank you, Norman. I think they should not exist. Look, I put my smart glasses on, and that's because I was walking in the park a couple of days ago, and some kids started talking to me, and they realized that I had an exoskeleton, and they also realized that I had those smart glasses. They were very interested in what the exoskeleton is for, and also what the smart glasses are for. I explained it to them, and they immediately said, "That's awesome. I can cheat with that," because it can put something in your screen, and then you can read the answers. You don't have to learn them by heart. You can read the answers. If he gets tested on something very boring, he doesn't have to learn it by heart. He just puts it in his smart glasses, and then he can ace the test. And that's what they always say. Everybody who sees my smart glass, the first idea they get, I don't know why, but the first idea they get is, I can cheat with it. That's what they come up. Not just the kids, everybody. Even people over 18, 20 and on, they still think, can I cheat with that? That's the first thing they're interested. They're not interested in reading a book. They're not interested in having the time, the weather, the date, nothing of that message. That doesn't come to their mind. The only thing they want is to know if they can cheat with it, if it would work so that they could cheat. That's what they always come up with as soon as they see those classes and realize what they can do. To me, that's totally wrong. There's nothing like cheating on earth. You will face obstacles during your life, and you have to overcome those obstacles. It doesn't matter what you use to overcome the obstacle. The only thing that matters is that you are capable of overcoming the obstacle. Cheating doesn't exist to me. What exists is that we try to do hard stuff and produce more, get better at stuff, and so on. But there's no cheating. If all the obstacles that are put in front of you, you have to find a way around. And you call that cheating. That's not cheating. That's using your intelligence. That's being a human. That's finding solution. The concept of cheating doesn't exist to me. Now, a kid, for example, how would a kid learn mathematics? Or how would a kid learn to read and to write? Because he's interested in interacting with me. He's interested in being capable of doing what his peers can do. He will study enough so that he can participate in the class, that he can be a student. He will spontaneously learn the stuff that is interesting. And when you put a grading system, then they don't care about anything anymore. The only objective that they have is to do the less effort possible in order to pass the grade. But they have no passion about the subject. They're not interested in it. They don't want to get better. If I teach trading, I will explain to them trading is important. You have to have the fundamentals, but technical analysis is important, and it can always be improved because there's many indicators and you can always come up with something new. But once they understand that, I don't want them just to ask me, what indicator are you using? What are the parameters of that indicator? Of course, if they ask me, I will give it to them. But I want them to be able to find their own indicator and put their own parameters on it. Do you see? I want them to be able to do the work on their own because it's very limited. I'm good up to a certain degree, but my students could outperform me by a lot. And he would never do that if he's limited by following my teaching and doing exactly the same as I do. To me, there's no cheating the concept is fake and grading somebody is also fake. Now, there's something real. There's the poker table. And the poker table will tell you how good you are. And there's also something real with the real stuff, like the markets. The markets will tell you how good you are, how much money you make, how much money you lose. Something real, playing the piano. When you play the piano, you see, you hear how good you are. And there's something real with fishing. When you go fishing, you'll find out how many fish you catch, or if you catch no fish. So with a lot of things, nearly everything, there's something real. If you're an intellectual, well, you will find out how good you are. I can read your books and we can talk about those books, and you should be interested in that. I'm interested in talking about my books. I don't understand those intellectuals who produce stuff and never talk about it and never accept any criticism. To me, it's a dead end. I think it's very different. I don't think at all that we have to get brainwashed in school and that the enjoyment of life has to be destroyed. Those kids in the park who ask me questions, I only talked with them like for 2 or 5 minutes. But they were extremely curious and every question was extremely interesting and intelligent. They are very observant and they want to understand everything. They have natural curiosity that makes out of them a genius. I believe that they are all genius while they are young. But once they are old, well, then they don't talk to you anymore, that they're not interested in anything anymore. And you cannot make them do anything. It's like my friends. You're still interested in the exoskeleton. But none of my friends here, I propose to all of my friends, if they don't want to try my exoskeleton, none of them wants. Life, it could be something great if we don't destroy it. And we destroy it with violence. And we destroy it by grading people and making them believe that some are smart and some are not. Not everybody is as fast. But that doesn't mean that they are stupid. My friend Marian, I don't want to say she's not the smartest, but she didn't study in university. She didn't get the best grades. But it's still very interesting to talk to her because at least she has something she's passionate about. It is her Bible. And that already, just that passion about her Bible, well, there's a lot of stuff you can talk about since she's passionate about that. But most people, they lose every kind of passion and they just try to get by with life. Just try to do an easy job, get a salary, and then they wait until they retire. And then once they retire, they wait for death. But there's nothing that really interests them. There's nothing that they want to do. They have lost every kind of joy about life. Yesterday night, I went to sleep in the afternoon, but I didn't sleep a lot. Then I woke up maybe 7 o'clock in the evening. I went for a run. I worked the entire night, non-stop. I was working. And this morning at 11 o'clock, I was still awake and I went again for a run. Normally I sleep between runs, but I did 2 runs and the second one I did, I was tired. Then I come back, I sleep for 2 hours and now I have a passionate discussion with you about education, philosophy, society. And after that, we'll maybe find the time to look at some poker hands or you teach me something regarding poker. There's much thing that could interest you. But if you only do something because Kim Jong-un told you that he wants you to do that in a certain way, well, I don't think you get any fulfillment out of it. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's counterproductive. The best world possible is if you are the most interesting person I will ever meet, Norman. If that's the case, the world is great. If I'm the most interesting person people will ever meet, it doesn't matter who you meet, they're to the fullest degree what they can be. But that's only the case if you give them freedom and you let them behave as they will. And with grading system, you tell people that some people are bad and you tell other people that they are good. And if they believe in that, that is a limiting belief. They will never progress and they will never get any better. And the guy who thinks he's good, he will have too big of an ego and he will make a lot of mistakes. I've talked about a trader. He was called Willy Woo and he messed up in trading. He managed to get a hedge fund because he was popular. He created 1 or 2 indicators on the blockchain and he thought that was the holy grail and now he'll make a lot of money. And his hedge fund at the beginning was not too bad, but in less than 6 months, he faced extreme heavy losses and he gave up. And now he totally turned. Instead of being a trader, he wants to be an investor. He wants to do infrastructure and he tells everybody, I'm going to sell shovels. is totally shameful. He was not bad at his job. He was overexposed and he took too much risk, and he thought that for him it would be easy. And he did find out that in trading there's just one thing that is easy. That's to lose money. His ego was overextended. When you have millions of people who follow you, and suddenly you are at the head of a hedge fund, which has probably a couple of 100 millions, well, then you think you're invincible. You think you can do whatever you want, and everybody admires you because you talk about the blockchain and the indicators you put on it. Then you're on a huge ego trip, but it will hurt you at the end. For example, it's not bad what he did, but he should have been able to talk to somebody who had more experience than he had. That would have been something good. And you must realize that not every narrative has the same value. In the past, he was very proud of being a Bitcoin maximalist. And he told everybody that no other investment makes any sense. And now he totally switched. He sold his Bitcoin that was left. I don't know what was left because he did lose his principals and his client monies. But he sold everything, and now he goes for adventures in very centralized stuff. And instead of owning something real, he gets a piece of paper telling him that he has the right to something. And maybe he gets what he wants or maybe not, but he's depending on the goodwill of somebody else. And Bitcoin makes you sovereign. It makes sure that you don't have to ask for any permission. But all that he gave up, and he totally changed his West and his way of looking at life. He's very inconsistent in what he puts out. People must realize that not everything has the same value. And I get the idea, just to tell you. The idea is 50x on Bitcoin won't be enough. He wants at least 1000x, and he does believe that Bitcoin gives him 1000x. Now he tries centralized stuff regarding infrastructure, and he hopes that that will give him that 1000x, because he needs to make back a lot of money. But the entire way of thinking and acting and talking is wrong. And it's not that he's stupid. He's a great guy. He's pleasant to listen to, but it's a little disappointing. They're not just smart and stupid people. And just being smart doesn't even guarantee a good outcome. He's smart. He created new indicators humanity has never saw on the blockchain. Up to a certain extent, you have to be smart to do that. But it was not enough. It just was not enough. I'm convinced that his profit and loss, whatever he does, will be negative. That means that he's a losing trader. Just as 98% of the rest of humanity, he lost more money than he made. I'm not mad at him because he falls in that bucket. But you must realize that not every narrative is the same. There's stuff that are important. And sometimes you must be able to de-risk and not just look for always more risk and more crazy stuff. Just being smart is not enough, Norman. It's not enough. The only thing that matters is that you are the best version of yourself. And that's easier if you don't follow statist propaganda. If you think for yourself and take your own decision. I don't like when authority tells you what you have to do. In what class you have to sit, what grades you have to do, who you have to listen to. I think that's all wrong. I think you should decide what you think has value and what interests you. And then if you could, you would work 24 hours a day. I only slept 2 hours since yesterday. And I'm still up and I'm still interested in life.
And what would you say is the correct age for someone to decide what they can or what they should learn?
There's something we call the age of reason. I would, for my kids, up to the moment where I think they're now mature enough and they have now the age of reason, that might be the case at 8 years, might be the case at 12 years. For somebody who is more dependent and needs more direction, it might only happen at 14 years. But there's a moment you realize now he's mature enough and he can take his own decisions. What does that mean? I would want my kids to play a classical instrument, the piano or the violin, and they have no choice. Until they reach the age of reason, they have no choice. Lessons are there and I want them to play and I want them to exercise every day. But that stops. Once they reach the age of reason, then if they tell me, well, I'm not interested in instrument and I don't want to play it anymore, then they can stop. Now they can think and make their own decisions. Just as long as the kid cannot take any decision on his own because he's too immature, he doesn't know enough about life, then it's good if you assist him and guide him. But once he's capable of thinking for himself, you have to stop doing that. And he has to start thinking for himself. That's important. That's what will allow him to do interesting stuff and being passionate about that and being the best version of himself. Now, showing a good example will help him. For example, if you have a dad who goes for a run once a day and he always tells you, don't you want to come with me? You have that example in your mind. And then it's easier for you to do some sport later. But if the only thing you see is sport at school and nobody wants to do it and everybody tries to cheat because they're not interested in it, well, then you will never be healthy and you will never do it. There's not one age. I think we have to see everybody as an individual and adapt to him. Just as you adapt to me when you teach me poker, I have to adapt to everybody I talk to. And I have to realize what I can talk about to them and what I cannot talk about to them, what is too difficult to them, emotionally too hard. And a lot of people are very limited in what you can talk about because there's a lot of interesting stuff you would like to talk about, but they know nothing about it or they glitch out. It is too hard for them emotionally and they start to panic. That's just because the way they lived, I'm sure they could be totally different if the education system was different. I think we have a very bad education system. It's very old and nothing has changed. It's a total waste of time and it only exists because it is legislated into existence and maintained by violence. And that shouldn't exist. Even the guy, Ludwig von Mises, even he said, with the intellectual, what we do, we stop founding them, we stop paying money. There are no more schools from the state, no more universities, and you have to survive in the free market. And if you produce a product that nobody wants to buy, then it shouldn't exist. That's a hard way of pointing it, but he's correct. If you do that, it is better because then the vacuum will create new schools and the new schools will be interesting. Not like the old ones. When the state does something, he has a monopoly on that, which means nobody else can do the same thing. Because there's a law saying how it should be done and who does it. He creates a monopoly. And every other idea gets eliminated or could never exist because you cannot compete with it. But your question was about the age of reason. Did I answer it? Did I go on a tangent and didn't actually answer your question?
I think you did. And I think it is quite some parts earlier, but definitely when they go to high school, around 14, 15, they can choose here what do they want to focus on. So there's different schools, they can learn different subjects. Nowadays, they could focus on computers and AI or media or photography, or they can choose some subjects. Now, some things they have to still do, like Estonian math. I mean, some things are not that what they can choose, but it is a lot of choices. And even earlier, when someone's 8 years old, some kids went to a musical school, some didn't. Some went to play football, some didn't. Some started painting or skateboarding. In some ways, I feel like it already works that people do have these choices. What do you think?
You have a limited amount of choices on our system. How do people choose when they're at school? They get math, they get literature, they get geography, they get maybe a little biology, maybe they do some chemistry, and then they just by accident make a little better at one thing than the other one. And then normally they choose that one and hope they get a degree in it and then they work on it. But all that is formatted. You know exactly where you go, how many years you have to work, and where you will be at the end, what degree you will get and what you can do with that degree. You should know, you should have an idea. For example, when you're in law school, well, know that if you're unlucky and you're not good enough, you'll be a lawyer. And if you're better, you'll be a judge. But you know what the outcome will be. But all that is formatted. You work on a path where everybody knows exactly what they can expect to you. And you learn exactly how you have to behave. I think that's all wrong. You have to find out what is interesting and how you want to behave and what you want to do. Only then will you really contribute to society. If you just follow the herd, I don't think it's interesting. You must realize our slave masters, they want to enjoy life. And how do they enjoy life? Well, if they have some architects, if they have some entertainers, if they have some cleaners, if they have a chauffeur for their car and a pilot for the plane, but they use you like slaves. They're not interested in your fulfillment, in your accomplishments. They don't care if you write a real good symphony or if you discover some new maths or anything. They don't really care about that. They just want you to obey authority. They just want you to be a cog in the system and always do the same. That's not interesting. You can choose, but your choice is very limited. My choice is very limited. By that I mean I can only choose things that I know or that I start to understand. I knew nothing about trading. Why did it take me so long to become a trader? Because I knew nothing about trading and I had no access to any trader. And the issue is, if you're a losing trader, well, what will you teach? How to lose money in the markets? It's very hard. And you're limited not just by the things you know, but also by your financial wealth. How many years can you spend until you make money? If somebody can only survive for 2 or 5 years, that's not a long time, especially if you want to do something hard and want to be profitable with it. Even for me, my choices are limited. I can only do the stuff that I can afford and that I understand. And what I understand is that everything they teach in academia does not interest me. I'm very happy that I'm not in that system anymore. Once you realize that, well, then you try to find something else. If you manage to survive and find a solution and one way or another try to get an income. But there's very little. Not everybody can do what I did. I'm not fortunate. But the thing is, if you want to have the life of a slave, then that's what you get. You will have the life of a slave. That will give you some security. It will be quite easy because you know exactly at what age you start making money and how much you will make. But probably it's not interesting. And it's not the thing you could do best. The best you will act is if you're left on your own and you try really hard to find the best solution possible. That's how things get better. If you try really hard to find the best solution possible. And a lot of people could do that if they don't give up, if they just try new stuff. But if you only follow the herd, well, it depends on what Kim Jong-un decides with his school. If Kim Jong-un says you're good enough to be an architect, then you become an architect. But it's obsolete to me. Because it's not difficult to make the drawings for a bridge or a house, especially not nowadays when you can use AI. I think the society has to be built and everything has to change. Now, will it? No, they don't want to change it. They like to be in power. If you change society, they will not be in power anymore. They will be an obstacle for a better world. All the guys you elect are an obstacle. Every law you have ever created is an obstacle to creating a better world. Any replies, Norman? Any thoughts on that subject?
What was the subject?
The subject was that you can choose. And at 14, you can choose if you want to become a photographer, want to do some mathematics or informatics, some AI. You can choose. I could not choose that. There was no AI when I was a kid. But the choices created by Kim Jong-un, life to me is not just Kim Jong-un deciding what you should do. That's very sad. If I think that somebody else should decide what I do or what I should be interested in, that's very sad.
I don't know. I quite like how life is, even if there won't be any changes. And I think it's always some limitations in anything. Sorry?
No, go ahead with your limitations.
Nothing really. No, just that monkey can't fly and a fish can't climb a tree. And like, if you're not tall, you probably can't be a basketball player. If you're not very musical, you can try, but you probably won't be the next Mozart. Actually, I was thinking about that reading your book, and now what you said, that only a few people are born where they have the opportunities. But as I said, every person has a unique makeup and skill set. And we all have some opportunities that even a king or Bill Gates or Elon Musk or no one else has. I think that's the great thing in life, that it doesn't really matter what are the circumstances. Everyone can find something for themselves. Social criticism, for example, which you seem to like doing and are quite good at. I think society works quite well in that way that, for example, I've been thinking if I wasn't a poker player and teacher, I would quite like to be a chauffeur or a bus driver or something like that, or a taxi driver, just because I enjoy doing that. And I've noticed some people seem to really take pride in their work and enjoy, they're in a coffee shop, they're selling stuff there and they're very passionate about it. And you can see they clearly are having fun and enjoying the work they're doing. And I think for every work, it's possible like that. So I don't think for some people, it might be more fun to be a cleaner than to be a king. I think for some people it would be very boring if someone did everything for you and you had to take responsibility and delegate and meet other people meet the president, and then you have to fly to there on like different part of the world. I don't think everyone would enjoy that. Some people would like something else more. I do somehow see the glass as half full, as in we don't have every opportunity. But even if you gave us million more opportunities, if someone's very clever, they could think, but we still can't do this. There's always something. Even if everything happens like you wish for, I'm sure there's still a million things we would be unable to do, and would still look to the future that we could be able to do. But to look from the positive side of things, I do think there's a lot of opportunities, that life's quite rich and fulfilling, and there's a lot of nice things about how things are. Basically, that's how I see it. I'm quite happy with how things are, actually.
No, man. But I think we can create a society that doesn't use violence. The issue with the state is that it uses violence. I've come across the number that in Palestine, 90% of the buildings were destroyed. 90%. They have nearly destroyed the entire country, and they keep bombing them. They keep dropping bombs on them. But that's just one thing. Every form of violence is not necessary. We can build a society without violence. Now, can you be happy in the system like you are by being a poker player? Or can you survive like I manage? Or can you be happier if you are an architect, a lawyer, a clinician, a doctor? Up to a certain extent, yes. But if the state would use less violence, I'm sure you would organize different and you would live your life different. I'm sure you can come up with something more interesting than just sitting in a room all day long and giving the same prescription to most of your people. You could find a way of doing it without having to do that all day long. I don't say you shouldn't be interested in medicine, but it's very limited because they all have to do exactly the same and prescribe exactly the same pills. It's very limited, and do that with their entire life. Now, is it bad to do that? It depends. If you kill your patient, it's not so good. If you manage to be to some help to him, then it's not so bad. But still, the idea is just there's a lot of violence used against us, and I don't like that. If I teach, my students don't have to come to the lesson. They come if they want. If they find something better to do, something more pleasant, then just do that. I hope I'm interesting enough that they want to interact with me. And if I'm not, well, then it's better I don't teach. Then I shouldn't be there, standing there and teaching at the beginning. But it should be free will, and people should decide what they do, and you should never use any violence. The only sanction I would use as a teacher is if they disturb the classroom too much, I would just ask them to leave. I would tell them, you make too much noise, you're too disrespectful to me or to other people in the room. And until you go up and learn to behave a little better, it will be hard. For today, go and find something to do that allows you to have some fun and get rid of the excess vitality and energy that is in you. And tomorrow, if you feel a little more calm, then come back to my lesson and listen to me again. I think that that's how studies should be. And you just have to show them the way, the basics. And once they have the basic, they can learn on their own. They don't need you anymore. Now they will come back because they want to talk it through with you, because they want to show you what they have discovered and what they have done. But they will be independent after a certain amount of time, and they will be able to keep working on themselves and improving. in the subject they have chosen with AI and books and so on. I think it should be all different, according to me. Now, tell me, do I know the perfect solution? No, but I don't. And I don't say that I will come up with the best system. But if you don't lose violence and let people decide, they will come up with the best system possible. But you have to stop creating endless law on every subject imaginable. And you have to let people produce what is best. And if nobody's interested in, well, then it's sad, but that's the case. If I only sell one book during my entire life, what can I say? It still, to me, wouldn't matter. Because to me, my book is important. The book I've written is important. It makes sense to me. If the rest of the humanity has a different opinion on that, there's nothing I can do. But that doesn't mean it was uninteresting. It was very interesting writing it. And I want to produce much more and write much more in the future. And that doesn't mean I will ever be famous, but it does matter. When I meet somebody and the guy tells me I've written a book, I would say, what book? And I would want to read it. Now, when I tell people that I have read a book, nearly nobody wants to take a look at it. Nearly nobody. Sometimes there's an exception, but it's extremely rare. The curiosity in people has been destroyed, has been killed. And I think the system did it on purpose. But yes, Norman, I know your argument. You tell me you're happy. And that's awesome. That's really awesome. I like that. But I still think that a society without violence would be better. Any final comments on that?
I was thinking how after primary school, I think you don't have to go school where I live. High school and onwards is all voluntary. Actually, if someone's 14, 15 and they decide that school's not for them, then they have a choice to not participate in that system. And with violence, I think more or less I feel like world is quite peaceful. If we think back to history of the world wars, all the history is just a story about all the conflicts and wars. And clearly there are some, conflicts still going on between people all over the world. Personally, at least for my life, I have been fortunate that I have not had to live in a war zone. And that's quite a long time, 30 years to live without being in a war. And if I think about my parents and their parents and so on, and there was so much war going on here. The Independence War, the First World War, Second World War, and then even before that, like Northern War, Libyan War. And all the time, people were serving, fighting, like older people in Afghanistan, when the Russian army was in Afghanistan and we were under their control. Or in that sense, I feel like there's not much violence. When I think about the police or military, they have never really caused me any trouble that's worth speaking of. I feel like obviously things could be better. There could be absolute freedom. There could be no state system and all these things you talk about, but I'm just talking about my simple life as it's been day to day. And I think I've had plenty of opportunities. I've used some of them well, some of them I haven't used well. And overall, I feel like I have had a lot of liberties, which most of the ancestors did not have. If I hear their stories or how hard their life was or how much physical labor or farming they had to do. And if I talk to my older relatives, I hear many stories how difficult life was at that time, all the tragedies they went through, how they had to take care of their relatives for 10, 20 years, just being a servant of someone who's sick. How there's places people could go to, caretaking homes, and there's much, just comparatively speaking. I'm not living in Gaza sector. If I did live there, then I would probably not be so positively minded. Certainly there's some fortune in that. That's overall my perspective, that I feel like the government really leaves you alone if you do the bare minimum, if you pay your taxes and you pay the basic laws or things like that. No one really tells me what I should think or what I should read or forces me to read any newspaper or watch the national TV, or even if the national anthem, people are waving their flags, no one's forcing me to stand up or sing along. In that sense, I feel like I'm quite free and the police won't do anything to me if I'm not doing something for other people. If I'm not harming anyone or their property, then people will leave me alone and not bother me.
The violence I talk about is general. Norman, you do the devil's advocate. You always argue in favor of the system, explaining to me why it's not so bad. But there are different kinds of violence. There's the direct violence that the army, the police, and so on uses against you. But that's not the only violence. There's violence if you don't do what they want you to do, well, then you starve to death. That's a way of using extreme violence against people. Money can be motivating, but only if it makes you better. If it's a tool that wants you to improve. And even then, I'm not sure that it's the best. I'm not always pleading for a resource-based economy because it's so far off that people don't understand it. If you tell them we'll use only resources in the future but no money, then they look very strange at you. And the distance from where we are to there is so far. But if you don't want the struggle to improve and to make something out of your life, then you still should have a decent life on this earth. I don't want to see anybody starving in the streets. I don't think that for that you need the government to intervene. Look, when the guy is 14 years old and he realized that everything he has done until now sucks and he doesn't want to do any of that, what happens then in our system? I don't think he's in a good situation, is he? And his analysis is correct, according to me. Yes, everything he has done until now sucks. Everything he has listened to until now, everything the state has produced and put in front of him sucks. If the guy realizes that and he says, okay, I stop, I don't participate anymore, the sanctions are quite hard on him, especially if he's not fortunate, if his parents don't leave him a couple of millions. I don't like that violence. And the free market and anarchy won't take it out of the game totally. But I believe that it is easier to make a living. I believe that you can sustain yourself by just working 1 or 2 hours, not 1 or 2 hours, 1 or 2 days a week. And you would have enough income to assume the basic necessities of life. Because I think that every service will get cheaper over time if there are no taxes and no inflation and not endless law that make everything more expensive and more complicated. I think that because of technological progress and optimization, everything will get cheaper. Then at one moment, it should be possible to live with very few. I cannot create an utopia for people, but for me, it's inhumane. If you come to the right conclusion at 14 years old and you realize that everything you have learned and everything people propose you is just crap and you don't want to participate in it, you understand a lot about life if you understand that at 14. The sanction should not be death. You should not starve to death because of that. When you say you cannot do whatever you want, that's true. But the laws that are imposed on us are the laws created by nature. And nature is not so hard to you. Normally, it's easy to make a living. Normally, it's easy to catch a fish or to hunt and so on. It's easy to have a little garden and get some potatoes, some carrots. And life isn't that hard, actually. We have made it immensely harder with our system. I understand that people can find a way in the system to survive. But still, it's not like if you can choose and do whatever you want. Normally, you participate in whatever the system is. But I'm talking about human system. Like some hunter and gatherers. They go and hunt and they come back with food and then they share it with everybody. Humanity has always done that. Even our ancestors, the cavemen, when they did get injured, the group helped them. Sometimes over years or a decade, they give them food and they help them if they could not hunt anymore. They just did everything necessary for a fellow human being. That's what it means being human. And if you have a farm, you do the necessary work, but it isn't that hard. With modern technology, a tractor and modern tools, it's not that hard. Not everybody needs to work 12 hours a day to make the system run. And then I think you wouldn't think that it sucks. You would see your parents work as a peasant. You would see them do the daily work. And then when you see that some stuff isn't the most easy or the most pleasant, you would like to help them and participate in the system. but to a certain extent, not 5 days a week from 9 to 5. If you do that, there's very little left for you. I have 24 hours for myself. And apart from having to see a clinician from time to time and so on, I'm free to do whatever I want, and still 24 hours is very little. My idea is just society should not use extreme violence. And in the future, if we go for anarchy, I think that certain people will get extremely wealthy and they want to do philanthropic stuff, and they will start creating systems for the poor so that they can survive. They will buy a farm, they will buy some housing, and they will say, if you're poor and you have no income, you can just live there. And we'll even make some robots who produce for you and provide you whatever you want. And for the electricity, it gets so cheap with technological progress, we'll just give it to you. I think that once the vacuum exists, the state doesn't intervene and there's more welfare state, very wealthy people will do the job. I believe that they can do it just as good, if not much better. I believe that they actually will do it much better than the governments. Because the government, the welfare state exists for a very long time, but there's still an immense amount of poor people on this planet. So it did not turn out so great. And you say there are less wars now than in the past. That might be the case because it gets more dangerous to have any kind of a war. Why is the conflict limited to just Ukraine? And why has it not spread to other countries until now? It's because they both have the nuclear weapon. And if they go too far, the sanction will be too immense. But all that doesn't mean that violence has disappeared. Just to tell you, I mean, if a caveman can provide food, shelter, and health to an injured fellow human being over an extended period of time, maybe a decade, without ever getting anything back, I'm sure we can do the same nowadays with the couple of people who are unfortunate and don't make it on their own. The couple of people who cannot manage to be profitable at poker or at trading or at anything else. I'm sure that some people will get so immensely wealthy that they want to do something philanthropic and they will create a better world for them. The only reason why you want to see suffering and people starving is because you are a psychopath. Now, unfortunately, all the guys in power are, to me, the definition of psychopaths. But if not, you would never do that. When I see somebody in the streets, I don't give him any money. I did in the past, but I changed my mind because I know that he's not hungry. He's not sleeping in the streets. He's just coming here because begging here makes him more money than working in his country. That's why he's here. If not, he wouldn't even be there. I find that sad because sometimes you see beautiful women just sitting in the streets begging. She will get a husband and she could have a kid in her country, but she would be poor. She would maybe live only with $50 a month. That's why she comes here, because here she can make the double just by sitting in the street every day. I don't give those kind of people. But if I'm in North Korea and I see a kid starving to death in the streets, and that's the kind of stuff you see in North Korea, of course I would do everything I could to help that kid, and most people would. If you have the means, if you have a couple of bucks, if you self-starving, then you cannot. But if you have more than enough, you would start sharing instantly with that kid. You would not just look at him and let him starve under your eyes. You would act. That's my opinion. I don't think humans are horrible. I don't think we are the worst thing in the universe. Now, the issue is we get very easily programmed. We get very easily brainwashed. And then our behavior starts to be not human. And we start to say, well, he deserves it. He's lazy, or he's an addict, or whatever. And now let him starve. In our system, you don't even ask the question anymore because the state takes care of that and the state does whatever he wants. And you have no right to intervene. And you're too poor to do anything. But in the future, I think all that would change. It would change on the anarchy, and it would also change if we are more mature and we go to a resource-based economy and we stop giving food stamps to people. Because food stamps, they are necessary when there's a shortage, when people don't have enough stuff going around. But once you have enough stuff, you don't need any food stamps. everybody can just get what he needs. Any final comments on that, Norman?
Yes, what came to my mind is I think it already is like this, and that no one's starving to death in where I live, and people would get housing, they could get food, they would have people who would help them if they have addictions or all these things.
It exists up to a certain extent. It exists. Up to the extent the slave master wants to do it. It exists. I agree to that. Slave master always takes care of his slave up to a certain extent. Yes, you're correct. But there's a difference. The slave master will still use violence. He will not just give unconditionally to you. He will ask something in return. A certain behavior, you have to do certain stuff, etc. And on the other hand, you cannot ask something of people. Unless they are your employees, you have to give them a salary. But if not, you cannot ask anything of people. I know that certain things exist on this planet. I'm not going against that. But it's very hard because when I listen to you, it sounds like everything is fine and it's not so bad. And maybe there's some minor issues, but everything is fine. That's not the impression I get. I don't think everything is fine. And I don't think things are good. Look at the middle class. What can it afford? Most of the people cannot even pay for an expense of something like 500 USD in the United States. Most of the people cannot even put that on the table when something goes wrong. They live from paycheck to paycheck and they get into a lot of debt. For me, this is not the best we can do. I know that it might look not too bad and you find a way to survive up to a certain extent. But I think you can get more out of life than just to survive and just hope that the slave master won't make your life too hard. If you just take violence out of the system, things get better. If you take money out of the system, things would also get better. And I believe that if you give more power to the people, things do get better. But I don't believe in centralized authority and centralized solution. Those solutions come at a very high price. And the price isn't good for society overall. They want you to believe that it is good, but it isn't. If a state would be good, then it would have produced anything good, but it doesn't produce anything good. It does produce no pens, no cars, no great thinkers. It produces nothing apart from propaganda. That's the only thing it produces, and violence. I don't think that's great if the only thing you can produce is violence and propaganda. What's so amazing about that, Norman? It's very hard. You put me in a tough situation. I like when people make my life hard. But life is very depressing and very boring if you only focus on the bare minimum, on survival, and telling yourself, it's not so bad because today no bombs dropped on me. It's not so bad because today I will not starve to death. But if you never can think beyond that, it's a sad situation to be in. Because it shouldn't be like that. Even our ancestors, even the cavemen, yes, they hunted and so on. But once they came back with something and that wasn't so hard, they spent a lot of time talking, socializing, taking care of the kids, having a good life, singing and dancing around the fire. But nowadays, you don't see that anymore. You just see people trying to get by, just hoping to make enough money so that they can keep paying their bills. And they have no more ambition or love for life. They don't even want any kids anymore. It's hard for me. How do I explain to you that this is not the most optimal system we live under? When you always do the devil's advocate and you always tell me it's not bad, look, people don't starve in our streets and so on. I know that you can survive under the system we live in. At least a certain amount of people manage to do that. I still don't think you have to design a society around violence. You could get rid of violence. Violence is not necessary. With the only exception is in a case of self-defense. But beyond that, violence is not necessary. But okay, Norman, I get your ideas. And thank you for showing me that there's a different opinion and that people think differently than I do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great if you can appreciate that.
Thank you for listening. You're very patient. We did spend an immense amount of time talking about philosophy. I actually wanted to take a look at what you wanted to teach me in poker, but maybe it's this week because we already spent 2.5 hours. We just leave it as it is now and we focus a little more on poker next time. And in the future, it would be great if we keep our philosophical conversation maybe a little shorter. because I cannot make you sit in a chair for hours and hours. That would be inhumane. You have a life, you have a lot of goals, you have to play a lot of poker, and I cannot get much time out of you. But what do you think? How do we proceed from here on? If you want, we can just take a break and then look 20 minutes at some poker if you want to teach me something. Tell me what you think is best.
Which solution would you prefer?
My favorite solution is the one that you like most. That would be my favorite solution.
That's a funny way of putting it.
No, because I'm very grateful. I think our discussions are very interesting, and I really appreciate the opportunity that I have talking about those subjects with you. You did already a lot to me, yeah, and you don't have to do any more. But tell me what you would prefer. Would you still like to take a look at 20 minutes at some poker hands, or do we just meet next week and try to talk a little less and look at a little more at poker?
I think you would like to look at those poker hands. If you wouldn't mind, that would really help me if we could take a break for a few minutes and then meet up again and continue on.
Do we keep it on and you just come back in 5 or 10 minutes and we go on?
I just need like 2 minutes maximum.
Okay, great. I will also take a break and then we can take a look at my hands, or do you want to keep on teaching me the stuff we did last time? We had an interesting discussion last time about defending ranges.
You prefer to do today?
Great. Okay, thank you, Norman. I'm back in a couple of minutes. Not long, 30 seconds. You can take as much time as you need.
I'm back. I'm sorry. Wait.
No worries, Norman. I just look at how many hands I have marked. Only one hand. Would you like to take a look at it, or do we straight go into something else? Or we can look at an entire tournament.
I think we can do how you would like. What do you think would be best?
If I have to produce something, if I have to put something on screen, then I would choose a tournament.
I don't have a preference in that regard. You're the boss, you can choose.
Okay, I will skip, and when you see something interesting, just tell me and we take a look at it.
Yes, I would say you can pause when you have a question about something that happens in the hand.
I make a raise of 2 big blinds. I'm on the low jack, and I have one caller and another 3 bets, but a very high 3 bet. I just fold. I think you agree. Not too much interesting stuff until now.
I think you're playing quite well, no?
This is the last hand. This shouldn't be the last hand, but unfortunately, something messed up with my recording. I don't see any other hand. We don't see how it finished. That was the 20 big blind. Now we can do the same with the 15 big blind and see if that was more interesting. Okay, here I go all in and I win. One more all in. No, I'm looking at the same hands over and over. Here I take a decision to limp. What do you think about that?
I don't mind that decision.
Okay, now I know that the pot is very high, but I have 3 people who show interest. Well, I tell myself that 1 out of 4 is 25% chance of winning. A jack at a 10 suited is not a bad card, but it's not awesome also. And I did fold, but I think you wanted me to call. What do you say, Norman? Was my fold bad?
I would have folded here. I'm not sure that hitting a jack or a 10 will always win us the pot. I wouldn't count them as full out. I would more count them like maybe half, maybe 1/3 of the time a jack or a 10 would be good enough. Someone else might have these cards, could already have 2 pair, a lot of opponents.
Normally, what I should have done is simply look at my outs, and my outs would have been 6. Nothing for a flush, and also nothing for a straight. I would have had 6 outs, 24, and here the pot odds are what? The pot odds are 11. Normally, I should have called this. Do we agree on that? Normally. I know that you think my outs are not good, and that's why you don't mind my fold. But normally, the odds of the pot are 11, and my chance of winning 24. Normally, just according to that thinking, I should have called.
Depends what you consider normally.
I did not, because I have 3 opponents, and that's why I don't like it. My 24 outs. That's why I did not do it. For me, it's not normal facing 3 guys who show interest. But if I had ace 10 suited, then I think you want me to call, don't you?
Depends.
In the same situation with ace 10 suited, you want me to fold?
Well, I wouldn't fold ace 10 suited, yes.
You would not fold ace 10 suited.
I would not.
It's just that you consider jack 10 suited too weak. Jack 10 suited. It doesn't look too bad. Jack 10 suited doesn't look weak if I look at my range. But the thing is, with 3 opponents, I don't like it. But that's the only thing I can say. You said something like that you don't like those outs and that you would divide them by 2. But then you have 3 outs. 3 times 4, that still makes 12. Even then you should have called. I'm just thinking, if you tell me it's okay, you understand it correctly, and realizing that there are 3 peoples and you should fold here is enough, I get that answer. But I just want to know why you would have folded this. Because I get why I would have folded it, but I would like to understand why you would have folded that hand.
3 opponents, a lot of danger, probably someone will bet again on the turn. Even if it is a jack or a 10 on the turn, I'm still worried if people keep on betting. I don't see too many good scenarios for us to win this pot. And I would remind you that even if we are to see one street at a time, to multiply by 4 is a little bit not fair because we might not even see the river. Immediately, this decision is to see the turn, which is multiplying by 2.
I agree. Then it would give 12. 6 times 2 would give 12. I agree that it's probable that I don't get a jack, I don't get a 10. And even if I do, I'm not sure that I win. And it's also probable that one of the 3 guys who showed interest will bet on the turn. It's better to give up. Okay, thank you, Norman. Here we have my ace 10. I go for half pot and I win. I have 3 limpers. People like to limp. And I don't like having 3 limpers. I don't want to fold queen, king suited. I go for 5x. Do you agree?
I agree, but with so many limp, I would have possibly gone even more. I could see myself even going something like 7 big blinds here.
Okay, I have 2 callers. They both check. I do not want to try to bluff them out of the pot because it's hard to make a bluff work against one guy, but it's even harder against 2. I just check. They checked. Maybe now I could do a bluff. It's maybe a little safer, but maybe they're sneaky. I checked again, and now I can see if my king is high enough to win. Do you think that's a good way of playing it, or do you think that there's something wrong with it?
I think you played it quite well, but on the last card, on the 10, I would have tried to bluff. I would have tried to represent that 10 because I think it's quite unlikely that we are gonna win with king high here.
How much would you put on the table to bluff? Normally I go for half pot, but that would be a lot, no?
Half pot bet only has to work minimum 1/3 of the time.
Do you think it's okay going for half pot? Because you think I can win that 1 out of 3.
Well, I would have personally gone for more here to put more pressure on a 6 or a 7. I would have gone closer to pot size, which has to work around half the time. And I would think both players would fold at least half the time, seeing that they have not wanted to bet up until this point.
I understand the psychological reasoning. So if I go for pot size, it has to work half of the time. Now, why is that? If I lose 18.7 and then I make 18.7, I'm break even. Is that why it has to work half of the time?
Essentially, yes, the risk and reward are the same. 1 win equals 1 loss.
I would lose 18.7 and I would win 18.7. But if I go for box size, then I would win 18.7 and I would lose 18.7. But if I go for half pot, then I would win. They fold. I would win 18.7 and I would only lose 9.35. Then it has to work only 1 out of 3 because if I lose twice, I will have lost 18.7 and then if I win once, I would be break even. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great, Norman. Thank you. I have a limper and he checked, but I have button pair. And it's dangerous since there's a risk of a flush or maybe even a straight. I just check. I see the turn. He checks again. Now it didn't improve. I get 2 flushes instead of 1, a risk of 2 flushes. And the 8 is no good for me too. I don't want to bluff him because I'm not sure that I can make an 8 fold. And for sure cannot make an ace fold. And if he has a flush draw, he wouldn't fold also. I don't want to risk it. And I just check one more time. I see the river. The river is very bad for me. Not bad because I have actually a spades. And that makes it less likely that he has 2 spades. But it still could happen. I don't want to risk it. Let's see what he does. He checks and I will check also. But what do you think? Did I play it decently or would you have done anything different?
No, I would not have done anything differently in this hand.
Okay. He really likes his 9-3 offsuit. Are you alright, Norman? you talk a little less than normally. Did I say something that made you sad or something like this? Because normally you are more active than right now. Are you all right?
Thanks for asking. I do feel quite all right, although it has been a very long time, and certainly, I don't know, I was thinking something, right? I'm trying to be a better communicator and to say less, but what I say for that to matter more. So I'm trying to, I think often I can just talk about all the ideas I get with a poker hand, and I'm trying to see maybe a better way of learning is if you do most of the talking and ask a question if you have a question, and if I feel something's necessary to correct, then say that, but in general to try it differently, at least for this time, yes.
Okay. Great. I think that changing teaching style could be good because then the person who you teach to has to adapt to that and has to do an effort and change his way of looking or talking. It might be not too bad. And you can flip from one to the next. You don't always have to do the same. You're correct on that. I have no idea if that's the last hand. I don't know if they're in the right order. Norman, I cannot tell you what happened. I don't know. Let's still take a look and then we can call it a day because we did so long. Let's still take a look at my marked hand. Let's hope it's not the one I've already shown you. It's an ace and a jack of. The board is a little scary since there are two hearts on it. But if not, I'm not too scared. And I think it's a risk I can take. So I would like to do a half pot and see if he folds. What do you think about that?
I think it's reasonable. The good news here is it's tough to have a 4 or a 2. It will put quite a lot of pressure on player 8 unless they have a king or hearts. It's often they might not have a strong hand on this board. But I don't think it's mandatory to bluff here. I think your ace jack could see the turn without betting. That's what I think.
Is it better to make my continuation bet or is it better to just see a free card for the turn?
I think in this case it's quite close. I think a lot of people would do here a small continuation bet, which would risk less than half pot. I think very common here would be to bet something like 1/3 pot, somewhere around 2 big blinds.
Thank you, Norman. I go for half pot and he 3 bets me. I think I have to fold. What do you think, Norman?
I think we don't have a very good connection with this board. Our hand's quite weak, and I think folding is the option that makes the most sense here.
Great, I did that. Thank you, Norman. I'll let you go. What will you do this afternoon? This evening?
I'm planning to eat and then pack some stuff with me because I'm gonna go visit relatives tomorrow. My grandpa, my uncle, gonna see my sister. Gonna prepare for that, eat. Well, I do have to go to bed quite early because I have a lesson before I leave in the morning. Actually, not too much more I can do this evening. I mostly eat and prepare for tomorrow.
That's awesome. I think it's great is that you still have connections with your family, and I assume that you get along quite well. And that's a nice thing. I unfortunately don't. I had to cut the ties with all my family members. It's unfortunate, but I think it was the best decision. I hope you enjoy the time you spent with them, and thanks a lot for our long discussion and the time you took out of your day to see me and have that chat with me and take a look at a couple of hands. Thanks a lot for everything, Norman, and I wish you the best, and I'm looking forward to see you next week. Take care, Norman.
What do you plan to do with your evening?
I ordered something to pick up in town. I will do that in 1 hour, and I only slept 2 hours. I don't know how much I still can do before I'm so tired that I have to lie down. I think I will be in bed quite soon because with only 2 hours of sleep, I don't think I can last for a very long time. I'm already surprised that I was so vivid during our meeting because with so little sleep, it should be hard. But I think I can still be up until I have to pick my order up in town. And once that is done, it's just some food. And once that is done, I'll maybe eat something. And then if I feel tired enough, which probably will be the case, I'll go to sleep. I think I'll be sleeping around 9 o'clock. And if I'm lucky, I have a long night of sleep until tomorrow. I also, as always, have to check my charts, but that's what I always do. There's nothing new to that. I don't have to say it all the time. Thank you for caring and asking me. And I'm really looking forward to see you next week. Take care and thank you for everything, Norman. You're great. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening. All the best.
Thanks.